Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Ed, Edd, and Eddy. Ed, Edd, and Eddy ran for 5 seasons, and it's been rumored that among all these episodes that were aired, there was one that went missing and was only shown once on TV before it never aired again. The rumor started in 2001, and it was alleged that this missing episode was called The Scarecrow Boy. For a short summary of the episode, Sarah puts on a play, her own version of The Wizard of Oz, casting herself as Dorothy, Jimmy as the Tin Man, Eddy as the Cowardly Lion, Ed as the Scarecrow, and Double D as the director. After rehearsing, Sarah becomes so mad at Ed for messing up his lines that she decides to lock him out of the house. Since he was in his costume when this happened, the other kids in the neighborhood began making fun of him, calling him Scarecrow Boy. Even crazier, every time he is called Scarecrow Boy, he becomes stiffer, eventually turning into one. There's pretty much no evidence that this episode ever existed, other than fans claiming that they once watched it on TV.
And in our 9th spot, we have Miss Spider's Sunny Patch Friends. Oh, based on the title, it sounds like it should be like a pretty, sweet, innocent cartoon, right? Well, let's look at the characters in the show. You have Bounce, this blue character with a massive smile and orange eyes with orange eyelashes. Then you have Dragon, a dragonfly with long, sharp eyelashes and blue eyes. Honestly, you gotta look at their pictures. They're pretty terrifying. But the worst character would have to be Spiderus, a white spider with a weird human head and red lips. Then you have his wife that literally looks like the devil. Like, what's with these characters? They're all terrifying looking. Moving on to number 8, we have Real Monsters. Okay, I never watched this show as a kid, and I'm happy I didn't. You'll understand in a second. So this show is about a group of monsters in training. Ickis, Oblina, and Crumb are all monsters who attend a school to learn how to frighten humans. Kind of sounds like Monsters University and Monsters Inc. once I think about it. Now let's take a look at the design of these monsters. They are so creepy and you cannot convince me otherwise. So let's start with Ickis. Probably the least scary looking one. Ickis is like a little gremlin with a wide Cheshire cat smile. But his eyes turn red and his teeth turn sharp when he scares people. Then we have Oblina. She's like an evil black and white candy cane looking creature. But take a look at her beady little glowing green eyes and huge lips and mouth. Oblina is like a serpent type creature that can contort her body. She can use her teeth, lips, and tongue to scare people. Then you have the scariest one of all, Crumb. This naked looking monster. He literally has detached eyes, so he's always stuck holding them up in the air. And he's covered in hair and it just looks super disturbing. His scare tactic is to use his grossness to frighten humans. Well, they succeeded with that. So yeah, the creatures alone make this show terrifying. I would be shocked if it left a lot of kids scarred. In our 7th spot, we have the real Ghostbusters. Yes, our classic movie had a cartoon as well. This was a 1986 show filled with terrifying monsters. If this show was still around today, you know there would be tons of moms complaining about it, saying it's not appropriate for the kids, blah blah. Okay, Karen. So let's talk about some of these creepy monsters. So up first we have Akira. This is the demon version of a Mesopotamian goddess of disease and death. She basically wants to create chaos through disease. Her appearance is disgusting with a shriveled green zombie-looking face with worm-type creatures for hands. Each worm has its own face with a tongue with sharp spikes on it. Akira would then infect other individuals, which causes them to get big boils on them. These boils were in fact her offspring. Then you have Vathek and his pals. Vathek is a big blob-type butcher creature with a buzzsaw in his head. His friend Grizzle is shown with his mouth sewn shut and dentist drills for hands. And then you have Corpsicle, a big blob with no face and just hands for eyes. Moving on to number 6, we have Tales from the Crypt Keeper. I'm sure all of you 90s kids remember this show. I certainly do. Alright, so the Crypt Keeper plays the host of the show who introduces what each episode is going to be about. The series then goes on and talks about classic legends like stories of vampires, zombies, and werewolves. But a lot of the episodes have scary monsters that scare the human characters. Let's talk about the 2 most frightening episodes in my opinion. Starting off, we have the episode titled The Weeping Woman, where Camille and Mildred visit a haunted Victorian mansion. At night, they are woken up by creepy moaning and objects flying around. That's when they see the Weeping Woman, an old eyeless and toothless woman with scraggly gray hair and long black nails. The second night, the woman looks even more terrifying with red glowing eyes. She ends up chasing the girls around the house. not to mention chasing one of the girls to the top of the roof where she almost gets pushed off to death. Then you have the other episode titled Sharon Share-alike. This is an episode about a girl named Shauna who refuses to share her toys with her little sister Katie. As a result, she hides one of her old toy dolls in the vent so her sister can't play with it. Then the doll ends up coming alive and haunting her. The episode is really creepy, with the doll coming alive and saying things like, "You're not nice, I don't like you." The doll ends up chasing her all over the house, giggling and chanting her name. Move over, Annabelle, okay? We got a more terrifying doll here. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Scooby-Doo, my favorite cartoon of all time. But I had to put it on the list just because some episodes actually gave me the creeps. So I'm sure we all know about Fred, Daphne, Velma, Shaggy, and of course Scooby-Dooby-Doo, my favorite group of meddling kids that solve mysteries. Some of the villains are pretty creepy. Like the episode titled Vampire Bats and Scary Cats, where the team visits Daphne's friend Lisa and they encounter a vampire. The vampire ends up turning Lisa into one as well. When this happens, she turns and looks directly into the camera and growls. Just the image of her scary vampire face is just ingrained in my mind forever. Then you have the episode with the ghost clown, who, again, looks very creepy, and hypnotizes Shaggy, Scooby, and Daphne to all do dangerous circus acts. I didn't think that they could make clowns any scarier until this one came along and manipulates and hypnotizes people. How about the episode with the phantom green ghosts and their terrifying cackly laugh? Later on in the episode, the crew finds 5 coffins, with one shaped like a dog. When they open them, it reveals some of the characters unconscious in there. I think the scariest thing is how whenever they make a ghost or monster appear, it's always like a POV zoom effect style. So it shows the monster closing in on you as they directly stare right at you. And lastly, we have the episode where the gang visits a sanatorium with a crazed doctor character with green glowing eyes. In the episode, you can literally see dead bodies under a sheet being brought in and out. Although they weren't real bodies in the end, it's still not kid-friendly. And our 4th spot, we have Courage the Cowardly Dog. Yes, I know I've talked about Courage so much on this channel, but it's freaking creepy. One of the episodes that scared me as a kid was the one titled King Ramses' Curse. That's right, the Egyptian pharaoh makes an appearance in this episode. So Eustace ends up finding and keeping an ancient Egyptian slab. As a result, he's visited by King Ramses. King Ramses just appears outside their home and he's swaying back and forth. He's like, "Return the slab." Okay, now it's funny, but back when I was a kid, it was terrifying. That alone could just send shivers down your spine. Then you have the episode Freaky Fred, where Mariel's cousin Fred comes into town to visit. Fred looks insane with his creepy wide-mouthed smile and slanted eyebrows. What's even worse is that he has creepy inner dialogue that only the audience can hear. And it's entirely in rhymes. Let's not forget about the episode where Muriel gets possessed. Or how about the episode where that glowing white human face visits their home? All are perfect examples of how disturbing that show really was. But it's also a really good show, can't lie. In our 3rd spot, we have Martin Mystery. Another one of my favorite cartoons as a child, although certain episodes definitely scared me. So this show surrounds Martin Mystery and Diana Lombard, 2 16-year-old step-siblings that work for an organization referred to as the Center. Basically, their job is to solve cases and protect people from supernatural threats. There are multiple episodes that are completely messed up. The one I remember giving me nightmares when I was younger is the episode titled Revenge of the Doppelganger. Basically, in this episode, women are being attacked by some sort of electrical shadow that completely erases their face. In the episode, this creature attacks multiple women that all have similar features and steals their faces, leaving them looking like creepy mannequins. Or how about the episode The Nightmare of the Coven, where 3 students used a book of spells and released this witch demon thing. The witch ends up turning more of the female students into witches. They all look terrifying with their sharp teeth and green skin. And then we have the episode The Body Swappers, which is a reference to the movie The Thing. Basically, this organism creature goes around using humans as its hosts. In the episode, whoever the organism gets to turns them into big monsters with sharp teeth and long tentacles. And there are plenty of other horrifying creatures seen throughout the series that will definitely give you the creeps. In our 2nd spot, we have SpongeBob. Yes, I know you wouldn't think that this show would be on the list since it's about a cheerful little sponge, but there are numerous episodes that are quite scary. Let's start off with the episode where SpongeBob thinks he kills the health inspector, and then him and Mr. Krabs literally have to dispose of his body. which goes terribly wrong, and they just keep moving and hiding the body so that the cops don't catch them. Don't worry, turns out he wasn't dead, but it's still pretty terrifying. Or how about the hash-slinging slasher episode? When SpongeBob and Squidward work the night shift and believe they are visited by a dead fry cook with a rusty spatula as a hand. Or the episode where SpongeBob gets injected by snail plasma and slowly turns into this creepy looking snail. There are so many more episodes that I can name, like when SpongeBob gets a splinter and turns into this huge weeping red sword. The list goes on and on. The Hooky episode, oh my gosh. And in our #1 spot, we have the show Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Kids. This show is about terrible kids receiving cruel and gruesome punishments for their behavior. Honestly, it's a good way to scare your kids into behaving nicely. In one episode titled Death by Chocolate, it surrounds this greedy girl who we see indulging in tons of chocolate. She's also quite rude to her sister, often calling her a slave. Well, she gets instant karma as a fly ends up laying an egg in her chocolate bunny. She ends up eating a maggot, and as a result, she turns into a giant fly, in which her sister kills, and then chocolate just spews everywhere. Like, that's terrifying. She literally killed her sister. Next, we have the episode The Spaghetti Man. Basically, it's about a bunch of picky eaters who then get captured by the Spaghetti Man. The Spaghetti Man then turns the kids into spaghetti and eats them for dinner. At the end of the episode, it's implied that a family ate their own son for dinner since he got turned into lasagna noodles. And then they're shown eating the lasagna. Like, is that even considered cannibalism? I don't even know.
Coming in at number 10, we have Batman's Flashbacks. Batman the Animated Series still stands as one of the best cartoons of all time, especially when you're talking about superhero cartoons. There is so much about the show that is accurate to the comics, and it helped people in the 90s embrace the darker Batman and make it the new mainstream image. Not to mention it has one of the best versions of the Joker ever seen. And part of what made the show so good is how well it was able to bring in the dark past of Bruce Wayne. Throughout the series, Bruce has flashbacks of his parents being killed right in front of him and how he feels a great pain because he wasn't able to save them. I mean, Bruce, you were just a kid. I don't think you should let that weigh on your soul. What were you supposed to do? Disarm a dude with your 10-year-old self? But watching a grown man deal with the very harsh reality that his parents were killed right in front of him and that he was unable to save them is pretty heavy for a kids show, and that is why it is perfect for this list. Also, who needs therapy when you got billions of dollars, a fear of bats, and Superman is your best friend?
In our number 9 spot today, we have The Kitchen Casanova. The Kitchen Casanova was made in 1996 and was a part of Cartoon Network's What a Cartoon series. Basically, it is about a guy who is trying to prepare dinner for his date, but he is exceptionally nervous, and of course, Murphy's Law would have it that everything is going wrong. This cartoon was actually eventually pulled from the air because of the fact that at one point he accidentally slices off one of his fingers and blood goes spurting everywhere, which probably isn't an ideal image for children, but I honestly don't even think that that was the worst part. In the end, when the date arrives and he reveals the big meal he made, it is actually just the grossest and creepiest looking thing ever, and it had me feeling very glad that I was only watching a cartoon. The dinner has eyeballs, bloody bones, and a severed human foot, and a rolled up tongue that unfortunately unrolls and then twitches before being covered up again. Okay, so it's a pile of gross, not really food. I could get past that, except for the fact that they actually eat it. I just hate that so much. All in all, this whole thing is just very bizarre, and the ending leaves you with a very uncomfortable feeling. In our number 8 spot today, we have Sunshine. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps us out. Sunshine, or Little Sun, is a show from Czechoslovakia that ran from 1979 until 1989. It is actually pretty hard to find most of the episodes that aired. There were different segments in the show and different characters, and while most of it was fairly normal for the 1980s, there's one character in the show that is well known for just being extremely creepy. I know this guy isn't a cartoon and he's actually a puppet, but I just had to include him on this list. The character's name is Radifak Plachta, which translates to something like Big Nose Blanket. This character is made up of 2 men under a blanket, and he has this super long neck. He has an absolutely terrifying voice that honestly would be suitable for a serial killer instead of a children's TV show. The TV station that ran this show has been called avant-garde for not being afraid to show a puppet that isn't pretty, but I don't think not pretty is the best way to put it. I think downright terrifying is a far more accurate description of this guy. In our number 7 spot today we have Magic Mummy. Magic Mummy is another 1933 classic, and it starts off with two cops, Tom and Jerry, driving around in their car singing to some music that is playing, but then they hear a call that a mummy has been stolen from the local museum. Basically, a wizard has stolen this mummy so that he can revive her so that they can sing together in front of an audience of skeletons. I truly wish I could make this up, but I'm not nearly creative enough to come up with this level of content. Obviously, a chase ensues and Tom and Jerry try to recover the stolen mummy, and it's all very crazy, but finally Jerry grabs the tomb and runs off with it to return it to its rightful owners. In the end, when he arrives and opens up the tomb, he makes a pretty dark and disturbing discovery when he finds his partner, Tom, in the tomb instead of the mummy, and it seems as though Tom has passed away. There's a lot of joyful moments in this short cartoon, so it's not as terrifying as some on this list, but it still leaves you with quite an eerie feeling. In our number 6 spot today we have Help, I'm a Fish. Help, I'm a Fish is also known as A Fish's Tale and is a Danish, German, Irish film that has a pretty star-studded voice cast. The movie follows some kids who accidentally drink a potion that turns them into fish, and they've lost the antidote that will turn them back human. This is all fine and well and is actually a pretty decent kids movie plot, but there is one character in this movie that definitely adds quite a terrifying element. The villain of the movie is a fish named Joe, and Joe is voiced by the incomparable Alan Rickman, who we know knows how to play a villain. Joe ends up coming across the human antidote, but since he was only a fish before, the antidote doesn't turn him fully human and instead just gives him human-like characteristics. This transformation causes him to be this horrible fish-human hybrid creature that looks like his skin is tearing apart, and it just isn't what I'm looking for in a movie that's supposed to be a nice time. I apologize for this spoiler, but Joe meets a fatal end considering he drank this human potion underwater, and I guess when he becomes this hybrid creature thing, he could no longer breathe underwater, so that's also just a dark addition for this already creepy character. In our number 5 spot today we have Fox and Rabbit. Fox and Rabbit comes from 1935 and is mostly actually pretty pleasant, but there's one scene that is extremely dark. This short is about a child rabbit who gets sent to school by his mother. On his way to school, he walks past a carrot patch, which he doesn't know is actually a trap that has been set by a wolf. He remembers his mother told him not to be late for school, so he leaves the carrot patch, but he cannot stop thinking about it for the rest of the day. While at school, he decides to pretend to be sick and gets kicked out of school, so he returns to the patch where the wolf is of course waiting for him. I feel like this is a fairly normal children's movie plot, but the ending is what really got me. Of course, the mother ends up coming to save the day and rescue her child, and she scares the wolf off. The child sits in the mother's lap as they both watch the wolf run off scared. Both rabbits have these terrifying laughs and red eyes that scare the heck out of me, but then the mother rabbit's face quickly turns from laughter to anger as she turns the small rabbit over and begins spanking his bottom. The whole ending just leaves you feeling super uncomfortable, and it is honestly just very weird. In our number 4 spot today we have BIMBO'S Initiation. BIMBO'S Initiation is a short that comes from 1931, and it actually features an early version of Betty Boop, who has a dog's ears and nose. Basically, Bimbo is walking down the street one day when he gets pulled down below the streets by some underground secret society. Okay, cool, off to a good start with Bimbo getting kidnapped. The leader continually asks Bimbo if he wants to join the group, to which Bimbo answers no, as any sane person would, and then Bimbo is forced to go through these really dangerous events. He keeps refusing and then being put into these situations until he ultimately agrees to join this creepy cult. I feel like this one is horrifying for some pretty obvious reasons, not to mention just the vibe of this underworld society. And just remember that this was made in 1931, so it's not unlikely that some pretty shady things were going on behind the scenes on this one. All in all, this short does have a happy ending, I guess, but it is certainly mixed in with some questionable behavior. In our number 3 spot today we have The Cameraman's Revenge. The Cameraman's Revenge comes all the way from 1920 2012 and is unlike anything I have ever seen before, which after watching it I feel incredibly grateful for. Basically, it's a bunch of bugs, and I just want to start off by making it clear that these are real dead bugs that are being used as puppets. That little tidbit is enough to make me say no thank you, but if that's not enough to defer you, surely this strange plot will. Basically, Mr. Beetle is out on the town and looking for some companionship when he sees a beautiful lady dragonfly who he starts to flirt with. Unbeknownst to Mr. Beetle, the dragonfly's ex-boyfriend, a grasshopper who is a cameraman, sees this whole thing going down and is jealous. Well, as it turns out, Mr. Beetle has a Mrs. Beetle who hears about this infidelity from the grasshopper, but as it turns out, she is also having her own kind of adulterous experience. You really have to see this one to believe it, and the stop motion of the dead bugs just makes this whole thing something that I will never forget, but man, I wish I could. In our number 2 spot today we have CATDOG. CATDOG is actually a cartoon I can remember watching when I was a kid, and I remember it scaring the heck out of me. CATDOG is a half cat, half dog creature that gets itself into situations and has quite the time figuring everything out, considering the cat half and the dog half can't seem to get along. This is a weird premise, but it's not the strangest part of the show. There is an episode when Cat wants to brush Dog's teeth, and he crawls into his own mouth and travels through its own body to get to the dog side, where it then comes out of Dog's mouth. So now Cat is hanging out of Dog's mouth inside out with veins and muscles and everything we never wanted to see exposed. I know this was all probably just meant to be like a silly little thing, but it's actually so scary and just a lot for a child to even begin to try and comprehend. Maybe I'm just looking into it a little bit too much as an adult, but overall this show just has a very weird vibe. In our number 1 spot today we have The Devil's Ball, or The Mascot. This stop motion animated short comes from 1933 and is honestly quite a ride and a mix between fascinating and terrifying. Basically, it starts off fairly normal and fine with a stuffed dog named Duffy coming to life and then heading out on an adventure for an orange, but this isn't what we are here to talk about today. Once midnight strikes, the devil comes out of a liquor bottle, and this is when things start to get crazy. So basically now the devil is holding some kind of soiree, and things such as different creatures, vegetables, old garbage, it all begins coming to life and displaying human characteristics, and these are the guests of the ball. Over the course of the ball we see some pretty spooky things, like when the devil tries to convince one of his guests to stab someone. Duffy is kind of the saving grace of this whole thing because Duffy is actually cute and basically the only creature in this whole thing that isn't downright terrifying. All in all, the whole thing was originally 40 minutes, but it is tough to find that version, and most you will find now are a 25-minute cut. It is certainly worth a watch, but I wouldn't necessarily show this to any children unless you want them to be scarred for life.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have SUICIDEMOUSE.AVI. This is the file name of a supposed unseen episode of Mickey Mouse. Originally, people just thought it was a loop of Mickey walking past 6 buildings before the clip faded to black. He wasn't dancing or smiling, just walking, but other than that, it didn't seem too creepy. Everyone thought there was nothing after that, but when the clip was digitized, people noticed that it was a lot longer than they thought. After a long period of darkness, the clip actually returns to Mickey walking. There was now a gurgle cry in the background that got louder. Then the picture changed. We see the sidewalk go in impossible directions. Mickey's face curls into a smirk. His face then began to fall apart. His eyes rolled to the bottom of his chin like marbles in a fishbowl, and his smile crept up the left side of his face. The screaming noise continued until the 8-minute mark, and then suddenly stopped as it cut to the classic Mickey Mouse fade at the end of every episode, with what sounded like a broken music box playing in the background. The Disney employees who first watched this actually left the room and asked the security guard to watch to the end for them. Legend says they never know what happened at the end because the security guard killed himself soon after, right after repeating the phrase "real suffering is not known" 7 times. times. They say the file can still be found in the dark corners of the internet under the title SUICIDEMOUSE.AVI.
Up next, we have Caillou. He's this like bratty kid who has tantrums and he's never nice to his sister, and he stomps his way to number 9. Caillou's bratty behavior has a lot of parents upset because it's teaching kids that they can cry, throw tantrums to get what they want. Because he does it. Because of all the complaints, the show is short-lived, only having 5 seasons, going off air in 2004. Another cartoon that has the wrong message for children is a show called Max and Ruby. And they keep things a secret. And at number 8. Max, who's the younger brother, he's always getting into mischief, and his sister always has to like cover for him and get him out of trouble. And this shows children that they can just get away with anything and everything, and they are never under parental supervision, and they never tell their parents what happened that day. They lie about it. Again, teaching kids that if something bad happens, you shouldn't tell your parents about it. And at number 7, we have Johnny Bravo, a really cool dude.
Sassy. Man, I'm pretty.
But very inappropriate. This is one show you have to look back and you realize how just inappropriate it actually is. But this show for some reason was for you guys to watch as a kid, and me too. Johnny Bravo is a show about a womanizer who is constantly making sexual innuendos.
Hey, Beverella, that's a pretty eensy-weensy, teeny-weeny polka dot thingy you got going there. Wanna do the monkey with me?
There was a lot of hidden jokes in the show as well. Johnny Bravo can be very offensive and refuses to learn anything from how people react to his behavior. Our Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they seem innocent, but not on this list, and they make their way into number 6. The original cartoon has been around since the 80s. There is a lot of violence which entices children to imitate the fight. The show also causes children to overindulge in eating pizza, which promotes overeating and increases the risk for obesity among children. So you guys are probably like, oh my god, Landon, why are you being so stupid? Just if I watch this show, it's gonna make me eat pizza? No. Well, there was actually statistics proving that once this show aired, pizza sales went sky high. So yes, it's true. And the show is actually pretty violent as well. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles uses weapons to fight, encourages kids to pick up sticks, even knives to fight. Okay, there's so many parents complaining about the next one, and right now we're in at number 5, and we're talking about the cartoon Tom and Jerry. This is one of the oldest cartoons on this list. The original show was released from 1940 and stopped running in 1967, in which, isn't that the last year the Leafs won the Stanley Cup? Has it been that long? So the show is just 6 to 10 minutes long, and it has 2 main characters, which is a cat and mouse. They go after each other trying to kill one another. They have knives and guns. There's a lot of controversy around the show as well. Tom and Jerry featured a lot of racial stereotypes. The black characters in the show would have like large lips and bow-tied hair. There was a poor black maid character who spoke with an accent which they thought this is how you represent a black person's accent. Okay, where are we? Oh yeah, we're in at number 4 right now. We have Scooby-Doo. Where are you? Scooby? The cartoon ran from 1969 to 1971. It was really short-lived, and it was about a group of teenage friends and their Great Dane Scooby trying to solve mysteries. But this displays a bad influence for children. Why? Well, the show portrays a group of teenagers that breaks into buildings and abandoned houses in order to track down and eliminate ghosts. It teaches children that it is okay to trespass and meddle around in private property, which causes kids to believe that there would be no consequences for their action because, you know, the group never gets in trouble. But if this happened in real life, you're breaking in someone's home, you're probably going to jail. Now at number 3, let's get serious here. We have The Simpsons. And The Simpsons, oh man, this thing can get very inappropriate. So this is actually one of my favorite cartoons growing up. My fiance, she wasn't allowed to watch it for many obvious reasons. Now that I watch the show, like, I understand the inappropriate jokes, but as a kid, I don't know why it's for kids. They address topics that's too mature for kids, such as sex and religion. This is a still ongoing TV show and it's been running since 1989. It is successful, but there should be an age restriction on it. When the movie came out, the movie was actually rated PG-13, which is questioned to why isn't the TV show rated PG-13 as well. So the movie starts off with Bart Simpson's penis shown in like different ways. He constantly harasses his sister. The Simpsons has a ton of violence. One scene had Homer Simpson fighting the 41st president of the United States, George Bush Sr. Okay, what is worse than The Simpsons? Family Guy. Seth MacFarlane is one funny guy, but very inappropriate. And this comes into our list at number 2. This is a show that banks on humor, but this type of humor is not appropriate for children. This cartoon discusses politics, race, religion, and also portrays vulgar scenes, and the language is also very offensive. The American animated sitcom has been the target of numerous complaints concerning taste and indecency, and there's also a lot of scenes that suggest sex.
18, you're first.
Mom!
I like where this is going. Giggity, giggity, giggity.
Finally, we've all made it into number 1 spot. What is the worst? Well, you guys have to wait because let's quickly recap everything we've had so far. We've had Caillou, who is bratty, gets his own way. Scooby-Doo and the gang breaks into houses all the time. We have the Simpsons, who addresses a lot of inappropriate topics. And finally, in at number 1, something that should be filtered but is not filtered, South Park. This was a show I wasn't allowed to watch, and my parents weren't too strict, but damn.
Mom, I'm into this movie. I'm not going to bed right now. Chillax.
You most certainly are. Right now, mister.
I will go to bed when this movie is over, Mom.
This show has constant swearing, graphic violence, drugs, explicit sexual activity, and much more.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have The Peanut Vendor. The Peanut Vendor was made in 1933 and is a really short animated film and just shows a monkey who is singing a song. This sounds cute, but I assure you, it is the stuff of nightmares. The monkey is selling peanuts and his song is about how he is only there for a limited time, so everyone should come and buy some before they go to sleep. This all seems reasonable except for the fact that this animated monkey character does not look like a monkey at all and instead looks absolutely horrifying. If you put this guy next to Jason Voorhees, I feel like I would still be more scared of whatever the heck this monkey thing is. I feel like I do not want to buy his peanuts, but I'm afraid that if I don't, he's going to come and find me. I truly didn't know that a 2-minute animated video could be this creepy, but they certainly delivered.
Moving on to number 9 now, we have Squidward's Suicide. Even if you've never watched an episode of SpongeBob SquarePants before, you probably recognize Squidward as a character from the show. He's a sort of grouchy foil to SpongeBob's happy plans, but in this lost episode things took a much darker turn. In 2010, a user posted a creepypasta online called Squidward's Suicide. He claimed he had seen this lost episode during his internship at Nickelodeon Studios. At first they assumed it was just an office prank, but realized they were wrong as soon as they played it. The scene showed Squidward sitting alone on a bed while disturbing music got louder in the background. The scene is spliced with quick flashes of dead children and gore. When it cuts back to Squidward, his face is black with red eyes. Eventually, a strange detached voice tells Squidward to shoot himself with a shotgun. He does just that. He dies and the video ends. Apparently the police investigated all of this, but they couldn't find the culprit who made it, and the video has never surfaced online since. Probably just a creepypasta, but a really good one I think. Next up at number 8 now, we have Man's Best Friend. That's the name of this lost episode of Ren and Stimpy that first aired in 2003. It involved some aspects that the FCC did not agree was suitable for a younger audience. Ren and Stimpy are trained to be better pets. Stimpy is given a cigar-shaped dog treat as a reward. Their owner tells them to not go near the couch, but then says they should so that they can be punished. Ren sort of freaks out and starts sobbing. Stimpy gets yelled at for going on the couch. Their final lesson involves their owner teaching them to protect him. He tells them to attack him with a wooden paddle. Stimpy refuses, but Ren, who's sick of this treatment that day, beats his owner within an inch of his life. The episode was banned and the director lost his job over it. Moving on to number 7 now, we have Dead Bart. According to internet legend, there was a lost episode of The Simpsons from the show's first season. It was entirely written by the show's creator, Matt Groening, who decided to keep it a secret from the rest of his team. Now they say that Matt has the ability to predict the deaths of every guest star who has ever appeared on The Simpsons. He decided to put all of this power on display in this one episode. The episode itself was pretty horrific anyway. It involved Bart dying in a plane accident. The whole family mourned his death for a year, wasting away until they became skeletons themselves. When they visited his grave, every other gravestone belonged to celebrity guests who had appeared on the show before, complete with their name, birth date and death date. And legend says it was very accurate with the people that had already died. Now on top of that, some gravestones even featured people who hadn't been on the show yet. Yeah, that's sort of went up a level at the end there. Coming at number 6 now, we have Ed, Edd and Eddy. This is the story of an episode of Ed, Edd and Eddy that accidentally aired on Cartoon Network at 5 AM one morning. Legend says that the animation was choppy, the sound was constricted and muffled. A strange VHS line skittered across the screen. The scenery was described as overwhelmingly dark and depressing without changing props and other background objects looking stormy. The characters seemed agitated and angry. They had tears in their eyes. At one point the animation switched to claymation. The quality of the episode deteriorated from that point on, becoming almost unwatchable. The episode ended with Johnny swallowing Naz's head as she kicked and struggled. He held her like this until she went limp. A zoom in on his face revealed he had extremely small and very realistic looking human eyes. The camera then shows Eddie's house and only Eddie's house for the remaining 3 minutes, and then it cuts to black. Next up at number 5 now we have Candle Cove. This is a famous creepypasta that was shared in the format of an email conversation on a forum. It starts with one user asking if anyone remembers a kids show called Candle Cove that was on TV in the early 70s. Other users start saying they remember it too, and together they piece together the memories to figure out what the show was all about. Candle Cove revolved around a little girl who imagined herself to be friends with pirates. Their ship was called the Laughingstock, and there was another character called Pirate Percy that got scared a lot. Then the memories got creepier. They remembered the ship was a wooden smiling face with the lower jaw submerged. It looked like it was swallowing the sea. Then there was the villain's sidekick, Horace Horrible. His face was just a handlebar moustache above tall narrow teeth. The real villain though was simply called the Skin Taker, a dirty skeleton wearing a brown top hat and cape, his glass eyes too big for his skull. His mouth never opened or closed, his jaw just slid back and forth. When the girl asked him why this was, the Skin Taker told her it was to grind her skin. Then they remembered one episode where the show faded in from black, the camera cut between the characters' faces, and they were just screaming and screaming. The girl was crying, looking like she'd been through hours of this. The story ended with one of the users saying they had just visited their mum at a nursing home. Now she said she was surprised that they remembered the show because when they were little they used to tell her they were going to watch Candle Cove and then they would just tune in to TV static and watch dead air for 30 minutes. Next up at number 4 now we have Akaruyo Bubbles. That's the name of this Lost Powerpuff Girl episode. For those of you that have never seen the show, it's about 3 manufactured superheroes created by Professor Utonium. The story I read about this episode is truly horrific. It involves a twisted experiment which created a terrifying, murderous version of Bubbles. She attacks the screen and ends up dying in the end of the episode, with people staring at her lifeless, mangled body, but she's then brought back to life, only to stare into the camera with angry red eyes. She breathes heavily, the sound gets louder, and then the episode ends in darkness. I've summarized all of that there. The full story is honestly a lot more graphic, detailed, and kinda confusing. The actual episode hasn't even surfaced. Moving on to number 3 now, we have Tom's Basement. This is said to be the name of a lost Tom and Jerry episode from many years ago. Something seemed different right away in this episode. Tom's owner was being physically abusive to Tom, stamping on his tail and telling him to never go down to the basement. Tom and Jerry end up scrapping in their normal way for a while, with Tom getting pretty beaten up. Jerry pushes Tom to the basement door, and when his owner sees him there, he goes ballistic. He screams at Tom in a rage. Jerry appears to take pity on Tom and ends up stabbing the owner repeatedly in his leg. Tom opens the basement door and they carry the owner's body down the stairs. They find dozens of other human bodies there, all showing signs of violent deaths. They shake hands, seemingly pleased that they'd stopped this serial killer, but then an evil look covers Jerry's face. He stabs Tom and throws his body onto the pile. The final scene shows Jerry putting up a for sale sign outside the house and laughing manically. Next up at number 2 now we have Doug's Real Life. Doug was one of the original Nicktoons on Nickelodeon. A few years ago someone shared a story online of them discovering a strange episode of the show that aired in 2005. It started with a normal intro of line drawings, but the characters never appeared. The lines continued as normal, reacting as if the normal characters were there. Doug wasn't narrating his writing like normal though. He just wrote in silence for about a minute before the screen faded out. It came back with large letters that said Doug's Real Life. The episode started with Doug eating eating breakfast while the screen flashed strangely. It starts again when Doug gets to school. The hallways were full of kids we'd never seen before. It cuts and we see Doug returning home and greeting his dog Porkchop. Another flash and Porkchop turned into a hunk of rotting meat. Doug's house looks decrepit too. He walks into the house and talks to invisible people. Another flash and Doug was with his family eating dinner. His mum answers the phone. He thought it was the teacher telling her about him flunking the test that day. He imagined them yelling at him, their faces becoming gigantic and then twisted and red. The screen flashed back to the empty house. Doug was alone, crying and apologizing to an empty room. He went to his bedroom, which was empty except for a book and a pencil. He started writing. This time his voice was narrating. He said, "I can't tell which one is real." And finally, at number 1 now, we have Not Long Enough. This is supposed to be a lost episode of Futurama, one of my favorite shows of all time. The episode starts with Fry, Leela and Bender making a delivery for Planet Express. The planet they land on only has one single house surrounded by empty, desolate fields on all sides. A grotesque alien answers the door. He takes a box from them, he opens it, pulls out a knife and stabs himself. The crew don't react at all. They simply walk back to the ship in silence. They return to Earth to find New York deserted. Fry walks to the cryogenics building where he had been frozen and begins to cry. He steps inside one of the pods and sets the time to the distant future. The screen fades to black, and when we return, we see that the machine has stopped working. Parts of Fry are decaying. Bone is poking through his skin in several places. "It's what I deserved," he mumbles as he climbs out of the pod. His surroundings are now psychedelic. Strange patterns and colors swirl around him. Eventually, we see that this was all in Fry's mind. His final thoughts before he died. His frozen body is now slumped outside of the cryogenic pod. Bender and Leela walk into the room. Leela says he got what he deserved. She checks her watch and says, "Looks like we need to leave for our next delivery." She takes a knife out of her pocket, places it in a cardboard box and heads to the ship.
Number 10, we have, believe it or not, SpongeBob SquarePants. There was a study conducted and it concluded that just watching 9 minutes of the program can cause short-term attention span and learning problems in children under 4 years old. There was a lot of inappropriate jokes in the show as well. I mean, take a look at this picture right here. SpongeBob is blowing up this balloon that's actually a condom. Here is Squidward using a vacuum cleaner to clean his private areas. He's like getting pleasure from it. Here's Patrick and SpongeBob naked holding some money. Clearly a prostitution joke here. And this is a well-placed boner joke.
That's it. Patrick, your genius is showing.
In our number 9 spot today, we have Inspector Gadget. In the show Inspector Gadget, we never see the evil Dr. Claw's face on screen. However, there's been a long-standing urban legend that we did see him at one point. In this one mysterious episode, we got a glimpse of his face, and that was later used as the inspiration for the action figure of Dr. Claw, which now shows his face. The creators knew this was a huge deal at the time, and when you went to buy the action figure in stores, they covered up his face in the packaging, so you had to buy it back in the day to see what Mr. Claw looked like. These days you can just Google it and it'll be the first thing that pops up. His face is also briefly visible in the Inspector Gadget game for the Super Nintendo, but since the quality of the game was pretty bad, we never got a good look until the action figure. In our number 8 spot today, we have Dungeons & Dragons. In the 1980s Dungeons & Dragons cartoon show, there is a famous urban legend that the last episode of the show shared a crazy secret about the entire show that changes everything. The episode itself also reportedly never made it to TV, but some people claimed that it was accidentally aired once. This episode revealed that all of the characters were actually killed in a roller coaster accident, and they ended up in the afterlife. The writer who made the real final episode has denied these claims numerous times, and he even uploaded his script to prove it. In the ending, the kids deliberated after being offered a choice whether to go back to Earth or continue fighting in the D&D world. In our number 7 spot today, we have Gravity Falls. The story with the show Gravity Falls was that allegedly it was supposed to be 3 seasons, but was cut down to only 2 seasons after Alex Hirsch decided he wanted to wrap up the show. Apparently, many fans think that there were a lot of unanswered questions that would have been answered in this rumored 3rd season. The source of this idea comes from a Reddit AMA done after the season 1 finale, where a fan asked how many seasons he'd ideally like the show to last, with Hirsch's response being that he originally considered 3 seasons but now believed that was too much. Hirsch would say many times over the years that the show was never planned to have 3 seasons, and blames the rumor on the fact that he was not allowed to announce that season 2 was the last season when he first learned so. In our number 6 spot today we have Phineas and Ferb. Phineas and Ferb is one of those cartoons where there are so many strange theories, it's hard to know where to start. But the most insane one that I have ever heard of claims that Dr. Doofenshmirtz, the evil madman, is actually the father of Phineas. The main evidence is that Phineas and Doofenshmirtz both have the same shaped heads. Let's break this down. We know that Linda, Phineas's mom, and Doof actually dated way back, so not hard to assume that they could have birthed a child. The story is that the couple dated when they were both really young and eventually split up. Both of them go on to get married to other people and have kids with them. That explains Candace's father. After a few years, Linda either splits from Candace's dad and has a fling with Doof, or she cheats with Doof. Either way, it results in the birth of Phineas. Then, years later, she meets Ferb's dad, they get married, and then they turn into one big family. In our number 5 spot today, we have Strawberry Shortcake. Okay, so basically this isn't necessarily inherently terrifying, but it's kind of crazy to see the power of rumors and how even while the truth is out there, some people will still believe falsities. Basically, this story has to do with Strawberry Shortcake and how there was some troll out there who claimed to be the niece of someone working for the entertainment company that makes the show. Basically, this person went on to spread a ton of rumors, mostly relating to season 4, that includes a ton of false synopsis, and they even manipulated some audio and released it as proof. In the end, this of course was bound to cause trouble, so people began trying to clear the air, and of course once the season was actually released, it was clear that this troll had just released a bunch of lies. In the end, however, despite all of the proof that these were false claims, there are many people out there who still choose to reject the truth and take these lies as reality. In our number 4 spot today we have Mickey Mouse. So basically this is a legend that starts out 100% true. Basically it starts out saying that on September 1st, 1939, the BBC broadcast of the Mickey Mouse cartoon Mickey's Gala premiere was abruptly interrupted and ceased due to the sudden outbreak of World War II. That's terrible, and it's absolutely terrifying. The legend goes on to claim that after the war ended and when broadcasts resumed, that the episode was picked up in the exact same moment as when it had previously been interrupted all those years ago. That certainly would have been slightly symbolic but also exceptionally eerie, but it turns out that that is not true. While it is true that the cartoon was indeed the last program shown by the BBC before suspension, it aired in its entirety before the interruption in 1939, as well as after the interruption in 1946. It is believed that this legend came from a 1984 documentary which showed exactly what the legend described, but this was likely placed in the documentary for dramatic effect. In our number 3 spot today we have Gravity Falls 2. For another Gravity Falls urban legend, we have this one that circulated the internet. Basically it comes in the form of a screenshot that shows Dipper and Mabel with a slender man standing there watching them from behind. Definitely creepy, but turns out that this is in fact not real. The actual episode shows no slender man, and creator Alex Hirsch actually commented on this legend in an interview. He noted that one of the very first times he overheard someone talking about the show after its premiere was when he heard someone telling another person that the legend was true. Despite this rumor not being true at all, there is actually a Slender Man appearance in Gravity Falls media, and it's a one-panel cameo in the story titled Face It, which is in the graphic novel Gravity Falls Lost Legends. In our number 2 spot today we have Hey Arnold. Hey Arnold is an absolutely classic cartoon, but this legend surrounding the episode titled Pigeon Man is quite dark. Basically, in this episode there is a character who is called the Pigeon Man, and the legend suggests that in the original ending of this episode, he takes his own life after finding his home destroyed. The legend continues on to say that Nickelodeon forced the writers to change the ending because they were worried it was too dark, and if this were true, I would certainly be inclined to agree. In the end, however, this legend was in fact debunked by the show creator himself, Craig Bartlett. That was never the intended ending, and I think that's probably a good thing. In the actual ending of the show, the Pigeon Man flies away with the pigeons, and because of this dark rumor, people speculate that this was actually his death, but that is also likely untrue because of his subsequent appearances later on. In our number 1 spot today we have King of the Hill. King of the Hill had one episode that was subject to the internet's weirdest and darkest rumors. The episode in question is called Pygmalion. The episode as a whole is wild and it's really dark and creepy, which is exactly why it isn't really a surprise that there is a dark legend surrounding it. Basically, in this episode, there's a character called Trip Larson who suffers from quite a few serious things, and he also inherited the Larson's pork products plant from his father. Long story short, he does some messed up stuff and ends up meeting a gruesome fate in the end. I'll spare you the gory details. So basically, according to urban legend, it says that after Trip's death, while Peggy and Luann are talking and celebrating, you can see an incredibly graphic and dark image of Trip's body behind them. There is simply no evidence that this ever happened, and it's likely just a really dark story that had its origins somewhere on the internet, but you really just wonder exactly where this sort of thing came from.
Starting off this countdown, we have Angela Anaconda. Now, this was a Canadian-based cartoon, so I'm not sure if anyone outside of Canada got to experience this show. Lucky you if you didn't. But basically, the show's style is very creepy. It's like mixing real-life faces into the cartoon world. The human faces and bodies are all gray, but everything else is in color. So many people have commented on the show's style saying it creeped them out or gave them nightmares. And I can see why. Just the way that the characters move their lips and eyes are just, it's so creepy. And the opening theme song does not help their case. During this song, you see Angela sabotaging her rival and ends up dropping a heavy stage curtain on her. Angela is not a nice girl. She definitely has a dark side.
Coming in at number 9, we have Mufasa dying. Every kid from the 90s remembers this moment. This is one of the hardest things to watch to this day. If you have never seen Lion King, you have had your time, and I'm about to spoil the whole movie for you. And I don't feel bad about it because there's even been a new live action one that recently came out, so you've had lots of opportunities to see this movie. Get hooked up with like Disney Plus or something like that. But in this infamous scene, the evil Scar manipulates Simba so he ends up caught in a stampede, and then he tells Mufasa that he must go rescue his son. Mufasa saves Simba, but then puts himself in a vulnerable position where Scar comes in and kills him. And then you have a scene where Mufasa is lying on the ground dead, and Simba comes up to his dad's dead body and keeps saying, "Get up." It's hitting me right now. I'm just thinking about it. What the hell? How hard do you have to make me cry, Disney? What's wrong with you? I only have so many tears I can shed in one sitting. Here's a fun story about that movie. I saw this movie in theaters when I was a kid, and a few scenes before Mufasa gets killed, I turned to my mom and I said, "That's like me and Dad." And then boom, he dies, and my mom cried the whole movie. Who knew you could emotionally scar your parents? Coming in at number 8, we have Dexter Can See. Dexter's Laboratory is one of the best cartoons of all time, and it might have the best intro of any cartoon ever. That song is amazing. Every episode has Dexter using his big brain to whip up something to solve his problems, but of course he always makes things worse. And in one episode where Dexter wants to get rid of his glasses, he builds a machine to give him the best laser eye surgery possible. Now, Dexter can see every last detail of the world around him, but the thing is, he can see too good. His vision is so perfect that the people around him look disgusting and deformed, and he can't even bear to look at his own family. Coming in at number 7, we have Teenage Mutant Ninja Creeps. In the classic TMNT cartoon, there was the tomboyish news reporter April O'Neil. Well, one episode she is invited to a fancy party at an embassy, and she decides that she's gonna get all spruced up for the event. So she does her hair and she gets a dress, and then she shows off her look to the turtles. Then all of a sudden the turtles start to get interested in her in a way that's a little more serious than friendship. In fun Saturday morning cartoon style, this is just a crush episode, but when we break down the cross-species sexual interest, it becomes very disturbing. Coming in at number 6, we have the Mr. Meaty Tapeworm. It's got some puppets that have some strange features, and all their faces look like they're bulging out of their heads. And the whole show takes place in a fast food joint that is run so horribly it could ruin anyone's appetite. But in one particular episode, Parker eats some raw meat and gets a tapeworm rummaging around in his insides. Eventually you get to see the tapeworm as it gets fished out of Parker, and the thing is huge. It was like there was an anaconda living inside him. And then you get to see the tapeworm find a new host and crawl down their throat. It sounds like I just described a horror movie to you. Coming in at number 5, we have Katara Learns Bloodbending. Avatar stands not as just a great cartoon, but as an amazing television show, as it tackles so many issues involving war, famine, greed, and in this particular episode, the acquiring of power. The Avatar gang is on an adventure, and they meet a mysterious lady who teaches Katara a new ability. As the Avatar series moves on, we learn that all of the bending techniques can be used to manipulate something more advanced. With fire, we have lightning, earth turns to metal, and in the case of water, it turns to blood. As you can imagine, blood bending a person is pretty much an instant kill. The psychological effect on Katara is serious. It's one of the heaviest parts of the show when Katara breaks down and starts crying. Coming in at number 4, we have Sabretooth's flashbacks. The 90s X-Men cartoon is an absolute home run. It opened up so many kids to the world of mutants, and that world is not always rainbows and lollipops. In one particular episode, Sabretooth and Wolverine put their differences aside, and the two venture up to Canada to revisit some areas they used to know, and this unlocks some pretty dark memories, particularly one where Sabretooth has a flashback about how his dad used to force him to live in a damp, dark basement on a dirt floor because of his mutation, and how his dad would come down and beat him with a 2x4. Oh my god, that's really messed up. Coming at number 3, we have Batman Beyond Earth Mover. You can't really get more intense than looking at your own parent's dead body. In the episode Earth Mover, a man dies, but through some cartoon magic his corpse is given some superpowers with chemical waste. Being buried in the ground, he is able to use his powers to summon earth golems to send out for his bidding. He's doing this mostly to protect his daughter, and eventually she comes face to face with her father's rotting body that is all juiced up from the chemical spill. That's not something you're going to forget anytime soon. Coming in at number 2, we have the opening scene from Up. This is hands down one of the most screw you moments in anything animated. Like, Pixar doesn't play nice for a second in this movie. They're like, hey, why don't we open up the movie with a couple that actually found true love? They really love each other. And you know what? They're gonna stick it out for each other no matter what happens. They're gonna love each other until the end. They get married and it's a beautiful wedding. All of their friends are there. They build a home together. They really love this home and it brings them so much closer together because they work on it together. This sounds like the most beautiful love story of all time, and it sounds like I'm telling you most of a movie. No, we're only 2 minutes into the movie. Then they have a dream to go on an amazing adventure together, but the house keeps breaking down, so they have to keep taking their savings out to fix the house, and they have to put their dream on hold. So they decide, why don't they start a family? That sounds wholesome, and two people who love each other that much deserve this. Well, it turns out she can't have kids. Are you sad yet? Well, if you weren't, then she gets sick and she slowly dies. And then an old man who really only loved one person in his life is left alone 4 minutes into a movie. Coming into the number 1 spot, we have the Jelly Bean Man from Rick and Morty. Not all cartoons are for kids, and I think Rick and Morty is a perfect example of that. Rick and Morty still stands as one of my favorite shows of all time, but there have definitely been some moments in that show that are a little questionable. Like the episode where Morty gets to pick the adventure. This is the episode Me-Seeks and Destroy. Outside of all the other crazy stuff that goes on the episode, like the Me-Seeks coming together in a mob to kill Jerry, there's also a part where Rick and Morty stop at what looks like a mystical tavern. They want to grab a drink and continue on their adventure. Morty steps into the bathroom to take a pee before they leave, and then the Jelly Bean King comes into the bathroom. He seems friendly at first, but then he tries to kiss Morty, and then he attacks Morty, and then Morty has to fight him off and smashes his head in a toilet. The whole scene is super disturbing and makes me so uncomfortable. I think that might be the most disturbing scene in all of Rick and Morty, and this is a show that has people's heads explode on the regular.